Coral reefs are in hot water, literally. Reefs are ecosystems like no other, and we could be about to lose them to climate change. An end to coral reefs would mean an end to their vital importance to the natural and human world. So what would a world without coral reefs look like? And can we save the world's reefs? I'm Adam, a climate scientist with a PhD from Oxford, sharing what you need to know about climate change. And you really need to know about coral reefs. This video isn't sponsored. I don't want to sell you all stuff you don't need, so no sponsorships, no monetization. If you're into that, you can join my incredible patrons up here, or just liking, subscribing, and commenting helps massively too. Now, growing up in the UK, pretty far from the nearest tropical coral reefs, I had the feeling that coral reefs were just these beautiful, magical, far-off places. And I mean, they are, but there's so much more than that too. They are crucial for wildlife. Even though they cover less than 1% of the ocean surface, they support over a quarter of all marine life. And like with anything that's vitally important for the planet, that means they're vitally important for people too. You know, because people live on the planet. 500 million people across the globe depend on coral reefs for everything from food to financial income. And because reefs break up strong waves, they protect low-lying land from storms, which is getting more and more important as climate change raises our seas and makes storms more powerful. And maybe you don't care about any of this because you don't live anywhere near a coral reef and you haven't discovered empathy. Well, then you should know that by supporting the world's oceans, coral reefs are also supporting the world's food system and economy. So here comes the depressing bit. These vital ecosystems are in serious danger. You might have already heard of coral bleaching, where beautiful, vibrant reefs are transformed into these colourless wastelands. To understand bleaching, you need to understand that reefs are made up of tiny animals called coral polyps, and these live in harmony with algae that live inside their tissues and give corals their colour. By the way, those visuals are from a film I made for the channel Planet A, all about saving coral reefs. Link below. If temperatures soar, the algae can freak out and the polyp ends up kicking them out, leaving the coral looking white and lifeless. And that's what bleaching is. Bleached coral isn't dead yet. But lots of bleaching can end up fatal for polyps. And lots of bleaching is exactly what's been happening. The last year has seen reefs around the globe suffering from extreme ocean heat. Let's look at the Great Barrier Reef. This is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world and Earth's largest coral reef system, literally visible from space. And yes, the research for this video did include Googling fun facts about the Great Barrier Reef. Well, here's a less fun fact about the Great Barrier Reef. It suffered through 5 mass bleaching events in just 8 years, including the one we've just seen. And these are affecting huge swathes of the reef. This year, bleaching was recorded on 3/4 of the reefs that make up the entire system. Now, you might have read the news that the Great Barrier Reef had made an incredible recovery over the last couple of years. And don't get me wrong, this is definitely good news, but there is a limit to its goodness. The recovery has largely been down to faster growing coral species coming in, which can also be very vulnerable when temperatures spike again. Over the last year, we've seen just how fragile this recovery can be when rising temperatures stalled the growth. In fact, it can take decades for a reef to fully recover after severe mass bleaching, and as we heat the seas more and more, these events will start to take place so often that the Great Barrier Reef simply doesn't have time to recover. The more we learn, the more we realize just how extreme today's conditions are for coral, and that's where a new study comes in. To find out how the extreme heat of today compares to what corals in the Great Barrier Reef are used to, the researchers asked the corals. I mean, they obviously didn't literally ask the corals, that would be ridiculous, but I phrased it that way because it sounded more poetic. What they actually did is look directly at the temperatures the corals themselves have experienced. To do this, they studied the skeletons of Boulder corals, which can live for hundreds of years and form structures over 8 meters tall. Bands in the skeleton, like rings in a tree trunk, revealed how hot the water has been been over the past 4 centuries. And over all this time, the hottest temperatures were the 5 bleaching events that happened in the last 8 years. On top of that, the average temperature now is significantly hotter than it has been for the past 400 years. By the way, that doesn't mean that it was hotter 500 years ago than now, it just means this record only stretches back 400 years. And look, this result is super important, but it isn't exactly super surprising. We already knew that average temperatures on Earth are now likely higher than they've been for over 100,000 years. But investigating this on the local scale and really checking and seeing what corals themselves are adapted to, well, it really confirms that they are not adapted to the temperatures we're throwing at them today. And it's not just boiling temperatures that we're throwing at them. The carbon dioxide we're emitting is dissolving in the oceans and making waters more acidic. Human activities are driving outbreaks of coral-killing starfish. Harmful fishing practices are hammering reefs. We're dumping all sorts of pollution into the seas, from sunscreen to plastic. And when it comes to the Great Barrier Reef, adding insult to injury, Australia allows the shipping of fossil fuels across this World Heritage area. Actually, considering how damaging this could be to the reefs, should really say adding injury to injury. Getting to grips with these threats really is a matter of life and death for the world's coral. Us climate scientists compare different future worlds, for example if the world heats by 1.5 versus 2 degrees Celsius. So this normally gives results like, at 1.5 degrees, 1 in 17 insect species will lose most of their habitat, but at 2 degrees that'll be 1 in 6 insect species. So 1.5 degrees of global warming is bad for insects, 2 degrees is worse. But for coral reefs, it's not bad and worse, it's bad and game over. At 1.5 degrees of global warming, we're looking at 70 to 90% losses of coral reefs. At 2 degrees, we're looking at over 99% of reefs lost. That's what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found in 2018, and recent research backs it up. One paper looked at the regions of reefs that keep relatively cool when temperatures spike. It found that when global warming reaches 1.5 degrees, these would make up just 0.2% of global coral reef cover. When we pass 2 degrees, they wouldn't exist at all. And it's important to point out that we're already dangerously close to the 1.5 degree limit, and current projections indicate we could heat the world by 3 degrees by the end of this century. So these results mean there is a very real risk of the world losing these beautiful, unique, precious ecosystems within my lifetime. Okay, so coral reefs are kinda screwed. But fortunately, there's lots of things we can do to unscrew them. The most obvious and urgent things are remove all the harms that we can remove easily. For example, creating marine protected areas, protecting reefs from shipping, pollution, and overfishing. Then there's all the stuff we could do to help corals adapt to more inhospitable conditions. For example, bringing in the toughest corals to the coolest regions of reefs, helping entire reefs shift to cooler areas, and even working in the lab to create heat-resistant supercorals. All of this can help, and all of this is being researched, but none of this is a substitute for the real fix: stopping climate change. As long as we're pumping out greenhouse gases, we're raising temperatures and acidifying the ocean. Given how incredibly vulnerable reefs are, we need to stop climate change as quickly as possible and use every other solution we can get our hands on. And personally, I really do hope to live long enough to learn how we saved these incredible underwater environments, and not to see how we lose them. Now, as I was talking about 1.5 degrees of global warming, you might have thought of headlines like this and thought, haven't we already passed 1.5 degrees? And the answer is, actually no. And here's why. Okay, until next time, bye. God, I'm genuinely like bleaching as I record this because it is very warm.